Welcome back to Seahawk Boys TV. Great to be with you guys. Great to be back on here. Time for another Seahawks video, another off-camber Seahawks video, another video where you get perspectives that you're not going to get from any of the other retard channels like Hawk Blogger and Dan Fiends and Seahawks Brandon Nelson. You're actually going to get the truth. You're actually going to get the information that maybe you don't want to hear, but is probably closer to the truth. And you're going to get something that you just don't get with them, which is honesty and intelligence. Okay, so that's multiple things you don't get with them. Anyway, the subject of today's video is very interesting. It's a very, very important subject. Thing that came up a couple days ago. A couple of days ago, the Minnesota Vikings signed wide receiver Justin Jefferson to a brand new contract, making him the highest paid non-quarterback in NFL history. And of course, there was all kinds of Seahawks-oriented stuff out there, all kinds of responses. Oh, what does this mean for the Seahawks? What does it mean for DK Metcalf? What should it mean for DK Metcalf? I'll tell you what it should mean. It should mean that they trade him. All right, that's weird. There's some weird issues going on with my videos today, but welcome back to the Seahawk Boys TV. I'm your host, Mike Barrett, in Las Vegas, Nevada. Longtime Seahawks fan. Yes, I saw with my own eyes, with these two hazel-colored eyes, the first pass that Jim Zorn ever completed up the left sideline to Steve Largent, about 30 or 40 yards upfield against the San Francisco 49ers in the first ever Seahawks exhibition game, they called them back then. Preseason games, they call them now. At the Kingdome in Seattle, Washington, with my Uncle Johnny and my brother Dave. So, yeah, I have some Seahawks street cred that you do not have. All right, let's get into the subject of today's video, which is going to be, I don't know, people are going to debate me on this. That's okay. I mean, let's face it. You come here. You literally come here to hate on me. That's fine with me because I am not going to stop getting in your face about things that I think are right. I sincerely hope that my criticisms of the Seahawks are all wrong. I sincerely hope that somehow Sam Howell or Geno Smith is a unicorn, that they become a good quarterback, that we don't have the issues at quarterback that I think we're going to have, and that we get beyond the 7-10, 10-7 floor ceiling that I see this team at right now, even with improvements in coaching from Mike McDonald over Pete Carroll. I sincerely hope I'm wrong. If I am, I will be happy about it, and I will be singing the praises of Geno Smith and Sam Howell or whoever is the big star, but I just don't think it's going to happen. Somebody was kind of on me on Twitter X. He always says this about the quarterback, and we'll talk about that in a minute. It's like, well, yeah, because the problem hasn't been addressed yet. Yeah, that's why. All right, let's go into it right away. According to John Frischella Football, who I find amusing, if not a little bit of a crackpot, but I do find him amusing. The Minnesota Vikings on June 3rd have just made Justin Jefferson the highest paid non-quarterback in NFL history. 4 years, $140 million for arguably the best individual player in the game. Well, that is arguable, and we are going to argue it. He then goes on to post some context on why Justin Jefferson deserves the biggest contract for a non-quarterback in NFL history. He's first all-time in receiving yards per game at 98.3. No other player in history has even averaged 90 yards per game, yet let alone the 98.3. Pro Bowler in all three of his healthy NFL seasons. Well, that's part of the reason why you don't pay him. He's only had three healthy seasons out of 5. Offensive Player of the Year in 2022. Only the 5th player in league history to have over 1,000 receiving yards in his first 4 seasons in the league. Youngest player of all time to lead the league in receptions and receiving yards in the same season. 7 broke 4 Vikings franchise records in 2022, which, considering that's a team that had Chris Carter and Randy Moss, a couple of Hall of Famers, that's pretty impressive. Most receiving yards in the first 3 seasons of a career in NFL history. Most 100-yard games in his first 3 seasons in the NFL. Almost 1,100 yards receiving last season and only 10 games played. One of the greatest starts to a career of all time. Well, yeah, I'm going to take issue with that. And now the NFL wide receiver salaries as they stand for the 2024 season in total cash via Spotrac. Why don't they call it Sport Track? What the fuck is Spotrac? What does that mean? Anyway, Justin Jefferson, $38 million. Stephon Diggs, $29.7 million. Michael Pittman, $28 million. Calvin Ridley, $25 million. Marvin Harrison, I think that's his rookie total. I don't think Marvin Harrison gets paid $23.3 million this year, does he? Keenan Allen, $23 million. Mike Evans, $23 million. Deebo Samuel, $22 million. T. Higgins, $22 million. Devonta Smith, $21 million. Notables not in the top 10. A.J. Brown, Cooper Kupp, Tyreek Hill, C.D. Lamb, Amon-Ra St. Brown, Devontae Adams, DJ Moore, Brandon Ayuk, and DK Metcalf should be added to that list because he's better than most of those guys. So, okay, what's the issue? What's the problem? Well, we'll talk about that in a minute. Let's go over to Over the Cap and see what the writers over at Over the Cap have to say about this new contract. Thoughts on Justin Jefferson's $140 million contract extension with the Vikings. Jason Fitzgerald, who owns the site. The Vikings and wide receiver Justin Jefferson agreed to a historic 4-year, $140 million contract today that really creates on the rare true market moving contracts. That's not English. Something we have not really seen at the receiver position since the days of Larry Fitzgerald in his prime. Pro Football Talk has the breakdown of the contract so we can evaluate just how strong this contract really is. The wide receiver market has been one of the most difficult markets to really explain due to the contract signed by Tyreek Hill and Devontae Adams in 2022 that had paper APYs of $30 million and $28 million per year, respectively. However, upon closer look at the contract breakdowns, the legitimate values on those deals were more in the range of $25 and $22.5 million per year. They set a weird precedent where many receivers in the NFL are receiving balloon salaries on the back end of their contracts to artificially inflate the values of the contracts, which makes it harder to understand where the market truly is. Jefferson's contract does not use those same mechanisms to inflate the annual value of the contract. I would consider the wide receiver market prior to this deal to be around $28.5 million per year for a top player. That would include Amon-Ra St. Brown at a true value of $28 million, Jalen Waddle at $28.5 million, A.J. Brown at $28.4 million. To get from $28.4 to $35 million a year would indicate a 23.2% market increase, which is absolutely gigantic. You simply do not see moves like that today because it is rare for a player to have that kind of leverage on his team, nor for a player to have a skill level that has consistently been better than anyone else at the position. The cash flows on this one obliterate the current market deals. Justin Jefferson's first year is $18 million compared to $14.5 for Amon-Ra St. Brown and $16 million for Jalen Waddle. Second year, it's $50 million to $31 and $33 respectively. Third year, $76 million compared to $60 million. Year 3, which he's probably not ever going to really see, $106 million compared to $84, and $80. And it just goes crazy. This brings us back to the point that was made, perhaps mistakenly, by Vikings GM Kwesi Adofo-Mensah, DEI hire, where he indicated that Jefferson did deserve to be compensated as one of the highest paid players in the NFL, which I said at the time meant the Vikings had to use Nick Bosa as a comp, and that is exactly what they did. Cash flows between Bosa and Jefferson are relatively equivalent. Should the Vikings have done this contract sooner? I would think so, but it depends on how focused Jefferson's side was on matching or exceeding Bosa from the start. I know people are seeing this as a launching point for Jamar Chase, CeeDee Lamb, etc. While it may happen, I really don't see that. Well, that's the way it goes in quarterback position. Jefferson's numbers since he came into the league really blow away the rest of the league. He's averaged 98.3 yards per game. His last 3 times, he's third with 84. If you're one of the teams with a great young wide receiver and you go above this deal, you're making a mistake. overall, I think that we're going to see much more discussion in the next 2-3 years about the value of a top wide receiver. While that is a discussion for another time, receiver is now established far and away as the second most important position on offense. Ultimately, this is a great deal for Jefferson, and I think for the few high-end players around the NFL, if they can find the circumstances to hold out for value. Okay, so actually, he's getting paid more than some quarterbacks on this. So, all right, that's great. That's the over the cap guy's value. And if you look at the Vikings salary cap situation, if you look at 2024, Justin Jefferson has only got an 8.62 salary cap number, which is 8.6 million, 8.612. In 2025, he goes to 15. In 2026, he goes to 39 million. In 2027, he goes to 43 million. In 2028, he goes to 47 million, and in 2029, he's back down to 6 million. So this is a long-term deal with large cap numbers attached to it, but the first couple years really aren't too bad at all, assuming this is updated. And I do believe it is updated because he wasn't signed for the next 4 or 5 years. So, you guys come here to get a perspective that is different than everybody else. And I'm going to give it to you right now. So let's go back to the John Frisella statement. Let's go back to why he should be paid, why Justin Jefferson should be paid more than any other position player in the NFL. First all time in receiving yards per game. No other player in history has even averaged 90 yards per game. Offensive player of the year. That's an award made by sports writers. Pro Bowler in all 3 of his healthy NFL seasons. Only the 5th player in league history to have over 1,000 receiving yards in all of his first 4 seasons. Broke 4 Vikings franchise records. Most receiving yards over 3 seasons of a career in NFL history. Most 100-yard games. Almost 1,000 yards in receiving last season in only 10 games. Okay. What's the operative truth in all of these statements? What's the one thing that binds them all together for the most part? Yards. Yards do not win football games. They don't even come close to winning football games. Yards are a fantasy stat. They mean nothing. Your receiver could catch 400 yards worth of passes in a game, but if he doesn't score a touchdown and your team loses 37-3 like the Seahawks lost to the Ravens last year, doesn't make a fucking bit of difference. Yards do not win football games. Receptions do not win football games. Touchdowns win football games. Big plays to set up scores win football games. Taking a 15-yard pass over the middle like Tyreek Hill used to do for Patrick Mahomes all the time, and then run 60 more yards down to set up the game-winning field goal, that wins football games. Making those plays in the fourth quarter wins football games. Now, I don't really know for a fact what Justin Jefferson's fourth quarter numbers are. But I have heard many other people say that have studied it that he disappears in the fourth quarter. And I've watched a lot of Vikings games over the last few years. And he does. He seems to completely disappear when the game is on the line in the fourth quarter. The Seahawks have played the Vikings, I think, twice, maybe 3 times since Jefferson came into the league. And even though we've had some terrible secondaries, Pete Carroll specials, I honestly can't remember him making a big play. He probably did. He probably scored a touchdown. He probably took a 20-yard slant and turned it into a 40 or 50-yard touchdown. Probably did. But they were not significant impacts on the game because the Seahawks probably gave those up on like literally every drive. So when you start looking at the stuff that actually makes a difference, because what is a quarterback? What do quarterbacks do that's most important? They score touchdowns. and they don't turn the ball over. Those are the two most important things. That's why I think touchdown to interception ratio is so important. That's why CJ Stroud, who could have and should have been a Seahawk, video on that coming, is the most extraordinary rookie quarterback I've ever seen. He's generational, if not an all-timer already. His touchdown to interception ratio is 4-1 as a rookie. Unbelievable. So a quarterback that can throw touchdown passes, especially run for touchdowns, especially set up touchdowns, field goals, and extra points to win football games is crucial. The same thing applies to wide receivers and a quarterback who doesn't turn the ball over, doesn't fumble it when he gets hit, doesn't rush it and throw interceptions like, I don't know, Sam Howell. That's critical. So let's take a look at Justin Jefferson's touchdowns. Let's take a look at the big plays he's really made. And again, I'm not putting a temporal metric on this. I could. I bet I'm going to do some research, and I bet we'll find out that Justin Jefferson's numbers are fantastic in the first and the second and the third quarter and fall off in the fourth quarter, because that's been my impression of it. But let's take a look at, who's caught the most touchdown passes in the NFL since 2020. Let's just slide on down here and take a look. Oh, look, it's Davante Adams is number one. Davante Adams. Gee, is that a shocker to anybody? Because guess what? Davante Adams is going and deserves to go to the Hall of Fame. Mike Evans has 51. Mike Evans has 46. Tyreek Hill, who I think is the best receiver of this generation, has 44. Travis Kelce, probably the best pass-catching tight end, certainly in the last 10 years, 37. Stephon Diggs. What is he, a Texan now? Used to play for the Chiefs, didn't he? Bills, 37. Oh, who's sixth? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Sixth. DK Metcalf has 36 since 2020. Adam Thielen, 34. AJ Brown, 34. Tyler Lockett has 32. CeeDee Lamb has 32. Cooper Kupp has 30. Oh, and right tied with him for like 10th or 11th place is Justin Jefferson. 1, 2, 3, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12. Jamar Chase is right behind him. Jamar Chase has missed a lot more games with injuries. And then on down the line. Amon-Ra St. Brown has 21, but he's only been in the year a few years less. So where does this put Justin Jefferson in terms of the most important metric for a receiver, which is scoring touchdowns? Puts him in the middle of the pack. Puts him behind DK Metcalf. Puts him behind a whole bunch of guys who aren't getting paid as much as Justin Jefferson. So what does this tell you? It tells you that Justin Jefferson is overpaid. It tells you that Justin Jefferson is not even close to the best receiver in this game, much less the best non-quarterback position player in the game. He shouldn't be getting paid this kind of money. And the Vikings apparently panicked. They had their quarterback. And, again, it also shows you how great what a really good quarterback Kirk Cousins is. Because let's face it, if Sam Howell was Justin Jefferson's quarterback, he wouldn't have 30 touchdowns. If Geno Smith was his quarterback, probably doesn't have 30 touchdowns. Kirk Cousins is a really good player. It shows you that he is dramatically overpaid at this point with this new contract for his production, especially in the key moments, in the big moments, at the big times in the fourth quarter. You can't win games without moving the ball and continuing drives. Okay, that's also fair enough. But ultimately what you do is you win games by scoring touchdowns. And there are multiple guys out there that can do that. So I'm not saying Justin Jefferson's not a good player. But what I am saying is the entire NFL has become polluted with nonsense fantasy stats. that don't change the outcome of football games. Yards is one of them. Yards used to be important, but they were only important in an analysis of why did this team win this game over that team? Well, they rushed for 196 yards on the ground. Eric Dickerson had 174 of those. That's an analysis, but they're just useful for analysis. They're not useful for figuring out and winning football games. They're not. So Justin Jefferson is a fantasy superstar. He is not in reality a superstar. If he was, he'd score more touchdowns. He'd be up there with Tyreek Hill and DK Metcalf and Devontae Adams and Mike Evans and Travis Kelce and Stephon Diggs and Adam Thielen and A.J. Brown and CeeDee Lamb and Cooper Kupp. Well, he is there with Cooper Kupp. So, again, the Vikings just paid ridiculous coin for a fantasy stat guy. This is why you can't have nice things, Vikings fans, because you make moves like this. Now, personally, I've always felt, and I've been saying this for years, that Justin Jefferson is the most overrated player in the NFL. The reason he's the most overrated is because of the yards. It totally distorts people's concept of his value. And unfortunately, that seems to have creeped into the thinking of the Vikings GMs. Now, is this a thing where, I think I'm right and every GM in the NFL is wrong? No, I'm not sure every GM in the NFL would have given this guy this contract. Secondly, the rules have been modified consistently year after year, and even since 2020, to make it easier for receivers to get open and catch balls. And therefore get a lot of, wait for it, yards. When teams get around the end zone, defenses get tougher. They play harder. And so, the fact that he's broken all, let me just tell you, yardage records are going to continue to be broken because the rules are so skewed to the offense that they make it easy to do so. Because the NFL wants to be what college football is, which is no defense, no running game, pass on every down, and every game is 56-48. That's what they want, which is terrible football and not something I really want to see or sit through. But it's the way we're going. Am I predicting the Seahawks will have a better record than the Vikings this year? I don't know. I have to look at the Vikings schedule and look at their roster a little tighter. I think they're going to be about the same. I think the Seahawks and the Vikings will be vying for the last wild card spot. They're both 7 and 10 or 10 and 7 teams. I don't see their talent levels being much beyond that. But thanks for the question, Treebeard. I love you, by the way, Treebeard. You're awesome on the different streams. So the problem is now the market's been set. That's what the over the cap guy Jason was saying, is the market has basically been set. So let's take a look at the Seahawks salary cap situation. We've done this before. We've talked about it before. And so here we are. In 2024, this year, we have $1.14 million in cap space. Barely enough to pay for the practice squad and sign any injury reserve free agents. In 2025, we're $18 million over the cap for 2025. We have a lot of 30-year-old players, past 30-year-old players, or players who are at around 30 years old that are definitely making big money and probably shouldn't be making big money. So how do we fix that? Well, we have a player on our roster who is, in my opinion, better than Justin Jefferson. His name is DK Metcalf. He makes more big plays. He scores more touchdowns. He's faster. He's the fastest receiver in the league, probably, him or Tyreek Hill. He catches the ball. When it gets to him, he just doesn't have enough targets in the Seahawks offense. Now, with Ben Grubb as the new offensive coordinator, we're all hopeful that DK Metcalf will be more productive, that he will get more balls thrown to him. But his quarterback is Geno Smith. Maybe Sam Howell. If Sam Howell can beat out Geno Smith. And by the way, if you can't beat out Geno Smith by your third year in the league as a starter, you're never going to win a Super Bowl. So don't give me any of this Sam Howell crap. So what would happen if, like a lot of people have taught, and I was not initially an advocate of trading DK. I was an advocate of let's go get a young quarterback that can be throwing the ball to DK Metcalf 2 years from now, and then sign DK to an extension now to lower his cap number while we can before the market explodes. Well, the market has exploded, and the Seahawks never got a quarterback. They could have quite easily drafted Spencer Rattler, who was still available. Could have drafted him in the first. They could have drafted him in the third. They could have drafted him in the fourth. They could have drafted him again in the fourth. Could have drafted him in the fifth. They could have drafted him 4 times to bring in behind Howell and Geno and not have to be in a desperate situation at quarterback next year. A guy they could develop who had some potential. And we'll talk about that in a minute. But they didn't do that. So now we're in a situation where we have inadequate quarterbacks and a phenomenal wide receiver who has apparently some interest on the trade market. The Pittsburgh Steelers have been shown to be interested in DK Metcalf. I wonder why that is. I wonder if there's somebody wearing number 3 on the Pittsburgh Steelers that might want to reunite with one of the best receivers in football. And by the way, that chart that I showed you earlier about the receivers, that's really where DK Metcalf ranks. Top 5 or 6 receivers in this league, easily. And he's typically rated down around the 20s because of East Coast bias. But what you have to do is you have to go back to the Seahawks salary cap situation. And there are a couple ways to fix it. And the best way to fix it, the most logical way, not the best way, not a way that makes me happy, is to trade DK Metcalf now that it's past June 1st. If you trade DK Metcalf right now, you save $17 million on the cap for 2024. You save another $22 million on the cap for 2025. So that's a total of what? $39 million under the cap over 2 years if you trade DK. So let's just go ahead and submit that and see what happens. Okay, geez, we jumped to $18 million in cap space for 2024, some of which we can roll over, and we're now $4 million under the cap in 2025 as opposed to being $17 million over. It makes sense. It makes complete sense to trade DK Metcalf. Now, there are people who argue, that I think you can get a first and a third for DK. That's what I'd be asking. That's what AJ Brown went for, and he's got totally comparable stats to AJ Brown. However, people are saying, well, now the market has shifted. And the trade market value for receivers has dropped. Look at Brandon Ayuk. 49ers couldn't trade him. Look at Debo. 49ers couldn't trade him. But DK does have a special relationship with the quarterback in Pittsburgh. And they could be convinced to part with something along the lines of a first and a third. Now, has the market shifted because the contracts that have to be paid out? Yeah. If you're talking about paying out a ridiculous contract like Justin Jefferson's contract that he just got for a fantasy player, yeah, it makes it makes a difference. So let's say you couldn't get a first or third. Let's say you only got a second and a fifth. I'd still do it because of the cap savings. So if you did this, you'd save $39 million in cap space. You'd have $18 million more this year. Not that you can do much with that, but you can roll some of it over into next year. And next year you go into the draft, you have a first, 2 seconds, a third, 2 fourths, a fifth, and 2 fifths. That's a lot of draft capital, which you can use to trade up and actually go get your quarterback since you haven't done anything at quarterback for the last 3 years. And you can then replace DK with another receiver off the street, or you can replace him with somebody that you draft with some of those draft picks because you're not going to have to spend them all to get up and get the quarterback you want. The other thing you can do in 2025 is you can get rid of Geno, who is going to have a cap number, ridiculous cap hit of 38.5 million. You can save 25 million under the cap, so get rid of him. You cut loose your other over 30 overpaid players. Tyler Lockett, $17 million savings. Draymond Jones, $16.5 million savings. Leonard Williams, who you overpaid for, $12.5 million savings. And you have 75 million and 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 draft picks in the first 5 rounds and $75 million to go get a new wide receiver number 1, a new quarterback number 1, and fill in these other positions. And the reality is, look, you drafted Byron Murphy this year. All I'm hearing about is how fantastic Byron Murphy is. What a great pick he was. Well, then you don't really need Draymond Jones and Leonard Williams. You fill in those spots with the Rayshon Jenkins of the world. And where's the other guy from Michigan? You fill in with 4th, 5th, 6th round guys. So your choices are to have no quarterback going forward, really, unless Sam Howell surprises, and be 18 million over the cap in 2025, and keep DK Metcalf, and or pay him a contract on the order of the Justin Jefferson deal, which is gigantic for a guy who scores touchdowns but isn't playing with a great quarterback. So to me, it's a no-brainer. It's a no-brainer. You trade DK. Now, we had some discussion again this week with Corbin Smith. And he talked about, he posted these dumb sucking up to the Seahawks posts. Quarterback may not have been a need for the Seahawks in the 2024 NFL draft. Yeah, that's why it was stupid to waste 2 picks on them. But day 3 boils down to finding the best value. A close look at how Jim Nagy sees Maya Pritchett and DJ James. And I said, yeah, you're going to go far drafting a cornerback number 4 and a quarterback number 5 when a potential QB1 is staring you right in the face. So, of course, Corbin got back at me and said they weren't going to be drafting a QB1 in the 5th and 6th round. Oh, really? Because everybody had Spencer Rattler's physical talents as a 1st or 2nd round player. That's a QB1. That's a guy who could be a QB1. Spencer Rattler might eventually be able to be a starter, but he wasn't going to be better than Geno Smith or Sam Howell. Sam Howell has led the league in one category in his career. That category is interceptions. Yes, he's fucking better than Sam Howell. Now, we hope Sam Howell can improve, but come on, guys. Let's be serious, okay? Spencer Rattler was totally worth taking a risk with either one of those 4th round picks, and especially the 5th round pick. Totally worth taking a risk on, as we have established before on this show. They should have drafted him. They didn't. Now they're going to pay the price. So I guess it comes down to, do you want to keep DK Metcalf and have a couple of below average quarterbacks throw him the ball and pay him one of the most exorbitant salaries in the NFL to keep him? Because you're going to have to pay him something close to what Jefferson is making to keep him. Because DK knows his worth. I guarantee you, DK looks at those and says, Justin Jefferson, oh yeah, lots of yards. which is great if you're playing fantasy football. But in terms of winning football games, I score way more touchdowns than him. Over the same course of the last 5 years, 4 years, he's scored 6 more touchdowns than Jefferson, even though he's missed games with injuries. He's a better player than Justin Jefferson, better receiver. So you can keep DK and overpay him. And then you're not going to have the cap space to add new players next year. You're going to be $18 million over the cap. And you're not going to have the draft picks that you would get. I think you can get at least a minimum second and a fifth. And probably a first and a third for DK. So again, were I the GM, I'm trading DK. I don't want to. What I wanted them to do was to get a quarterback in the last 3 years that could just be coming into his own with 27 and 28-year-old DK Metcalf. But now, if they get a quarterback next year, DK is going to be 29 before he's ready, or 30, and making, $68 million a year under your cap or whatever it's going to be. That's not going to work. So the smart move, the smart decision, the painful decision is to trade DK Metcalf. That's the painful decision, but that's what has to happen. Will they do that? No, because I think John Schneider is a clown. So I think what we're stuck with is same situation at quarterback. DK, we're either going to lose him for nothing or overpay him. Because these guys are delusional. They're as delusional as Hawk Blogger and Dan Veens and Seahawks retard Nelson in thinking that this team is a contender. Well, they are a contender. For a wild card spot, maybe if everything falls into place, they are not a Super Bowl contender. The Seahawks are not close to winning a Super Bowl and will never be again until they fix the quarterback position with a star player, a top 10 quarterback. And right now they don't have that. And they've done nothing to go get one. So here we are. All right, that's what I got for you today. I just think the better scenario is I want my 8 draft picks next year and my $75 million to spend. And I'll find a quarterback, a wide receiver 1, a wide receiver 3, because Jackson Smith-Njigba should be number 2 by then, and a couple of defensive linemen out of that group. Out of all those picks and all that money, that's what I'm doing with it. Football Talk with Bo says, I was saying last season they should have DK as a real trade option. Yeah. It was a little early because we had to give Geno a chance to reach his 2022 level again. Even though, in 2022 his stats were great, but he didn't play at all well in big games. Because that's Geno. That's who he is. That's why he's not a top 10 quarterback in this league. He's not a star. He's not elite. I think that would have been a little early, but I do think the time is ripe now, and they've got to have some plan. They can't plan on going in to 2025, over the salary cap by $18 million. Let's go back. Let's just quickly go back and see what happens, because this should be interesting. Okay, let's go to 2025. We keep DK. But we still cut Lockett and Draymond and Leonard Williams, and then we got $28 million in cap space to spend. The only way we get more than that's significant is Geno. And then we have $53 million, which is about what they have every year to spend. So they'd be okay, but they wouldn't have the extra draft picks from trading DK. The question is that we don't know the answer to is, are they even listening to offers? There was a rumor that they were. There was a rumor they told the Steelers, get back to us after June 1st. Let's see if they do. Treebeard Mike, could you do a breakdown on the Cowboys next? Trading away Pollard and bringing Zeke back, they are hopeless. Yeah, Zeke is done. I don't know why they would spend money on Zeke. But There is some thought. There is some thought that they are going to let Zach play out his deal. Dak, not Zach. Dak play out his deal and go after like Quinn Ewers, who I was very impressed with in the college football playoffs last year. And CeeDee Lamb, I think CeeDee Lamb's a good player. I don't think he's a great player. I think he's more like Jefferson. He's a big yards guy, not as much on the touchdown. Football talk with Bo. You knew by midseason that the O-line, based on the injuries, wasn't going to give Geno the time to utilize DK's speed, though. He had time. There's a lot of games where DK was, I think the Cincinnati game, DK was wide open up the left sideline. Geno never saw him. Wide open from the first split second. He blew right by the corner. The safety was supposed to come over and help, and he didn't, and Geno never even saw him. So it's not just time. It's recognition. And again, it goes back to the last video where Geno just does not handle pressure well. He just doesn't handle pressure well, unlike our previous quarterback. So, thank you guys for being here. Appreciate each and every one of you, as few of you as there are. I'm going to have to go through to the YouTube channels, Mike Bear 3 and Mike Bear 333, and take off the no, it's not made for kids. Change it to yes, it's made for kids. Change it. I don't know why it does that in my automatic setup on Restream, but so you can go in and comment, like, subscribe, comment, call me an asshole, call me whatever you want. But look, the hard choice is the best thing for the Seattle Seahawks long term, the absolute best thing for the long-term future and short-term over the next couple of years future of the Seattle Seahawks is trade DK Metcalf if you can get a second and a fifth or a first and a third out of the deal, make the deal, save the salary cap space, cut the other older players, including Geno Smith, next year, and take the $75 million and the 8 draft picks and finish off your roster. Go get your quarterback. Go get another receiver. And there's a lot of good receivers coming out this year, next few years. There always is. That's the best choice for the Seahawks. We'll see what they do about it. I suspect not much of anything.